Minneapolis is the greatest city in the entire world. The first time I was in Minneapolis was to run the Twin Cities Marathon.
The sun is shining, so what else can we say, right?
That's right.
That's Minnesota. Luckily, that was in the summer and not the winter.
Yeah, right. I don't know if I'd have the same reaction then. Yeah.
So you got some shoes.
Oh, I got some Sweet Kicks, yeah. Some Boosta, some Beast Boss, some Moss, this banana, yeah.
No, I love Minneapolis, but it seems like safety has become a key issue.
People need to feel safe where they live. I do need to give some credit to our police officers that are working their tails off.
Yes.
They're doing incredible work, and I'm proud of them. I believe in housing as a foundational element for people to rise. You know, sometimes people say, oh, this is just not an issue you can just throw money at. Well, this is actually an issue that would benefit a lot from money. The short answer is we're making the change. Is it going to happen overnight? No, it won't. Are people right to demand urgency? Yes, they are. You know, remember all of the things that you love about the city because it's still there. Quit sitting at home on your couch watching Netflix. Like, there are great things to do into the city, and go out and freaking experience it. Or some packed, sweaty bar. Like, a lot of those packed, sweaty bars, they're still there, and they want to see you, and they want to serve you drinks.
I like the gold stores personally.
Yeah, right? Right? No, they're stunning. Yeah, I'm going to leave here with a hop in my step, I think. This is the real deal. Weekly deposit.
Welcome everyone to episode 14 of Weekly Deposit. We have today with us by far our most famous guest. He's the 48th mayor of the personally greatest city in the world, Minneapolis, an attorney who graduated from Villanova University School of Law, a past city council member, an athlete as a cross-country runner that was on Team USA and led to receiving a shoe contract, a husband, and probably the greatest title you can give, a father. So big welcome to Mayor Jacob Frey.
Well, that was one hell of an introduction. So thank you so much.
Yes.
I got to come on the Weekly Deposit like every single week now after hearing that.
We would love to have you. Yeah. Anytime we would love to have you.
I'm going to leave here with a hop in my step, I think.
There you go. The sun is shining, so what else can we say, right?
That's right.
That's Minnesota. So before we even get into the questions, you know, me and Julian were looking at the shoe contract deal, and we're big sneaker heads and stuff like that. What was the company, the shoe company?
There were a couple of them.
Oh,
so
okay.
When I first graduated college, I got a contract with this Olympic development program north of Detroit, and the company was Brooks. So it was Brooks running shoes.
Yeah.
And then a couple years later, I got a contract with Saucony. So for the vast majority of my career, I was with Saucony, and I'm still very loyal to them.
Okay. So you got some shoes.
Oh, I got some Sweet Kicks. Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Well, I mean, the whole running shoe world has gone through a bit of a revolution recently, especially in elite shoes that you race in, because they've added this carbon fiber plate, which is rigid but gives back to you when you hit the ground. And they also have found this super fancy foam. And so I'm jealous because these shoes weren't available when I was running seriously, and now I just mess around in them.
Okay. Do you think if you had those shoes, you'd be an Olympian now?
Well, you know, the difference is that everybody else would have had those shoes too if I had them at the time. But no, the difference is actually staggering. I know that's not actually the topic that we came here to talk about. But
no, exactly.
Sneakers are interesting.
Exactly. And that kind of ties in because you came to this city to run.
I did. The first time I was in Minneapolis was to run the Twin Cities Marathon. And I fell in love with the city. And I remember being in stiff competition trying to qualify for Team USA. And somewhere around the 15th mile or so, we were running by Nokomis, Lake Nokomis in the city. And you had like lake on either side of you, and the sun was shining. It was beautiful. And I remember the guy next to me turns to me and said, "This city is extraordinary." And I remember thinking to myself, you know, I could totally live here. And lo and behold, a couple years later, I was moving out here for a job.
Luckily, that was in the summer and not the winter.
Yeah, right. I don't know if I'd have the same reaction then. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, there's no better place in the world than Minnesota summers, and people really tend to enjoy them. So, okay, let's kind of dive right into the actual questions. So, you know, I think we always like to start off on a lighter foot before we get into the little more serious stuff. You know, me and Julian, who's not here today, are avid travelers. We love to travel. There's so much to learn, so much culture, so much just everything from a society as a whole. What's the last place that you visited, and what's the next place you want to visit? and preferably outside the U.S.?
All right, so the last place that I visited, let me put a caveat on there, before COVID. This also happens to be my favorite place outside the U.S. to visit, was Mexico City.
Okay.
Place is incredible. I don't know if you've ever been there before.
No, yeah.
But I mean, it's got history, people always, they talk about Rome or Paris or, these European cities. Obviously, those are great too. But Mexico City, first of all, is a direct flight. You head down there. The culture is stupendous. The food is out of this world. The vibe and dynamic that you get on the street is incredible because there's so many people from different walks of life. And it's also cheap.
Yeah.
So you can live like royalty for a few days there while you're in Mexico City and have a ball.
Yeah, I've been to Puerto Vallarta, which is on the west coast
Yep.
of Mexico, and oh my God, it's you see the ocean, it's sunny, it's beautiful food, like you said. So I agree. So Mexico City will be added to the list.
You got to go.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so we kind of wanted to talk. As mayor, we're sure your plate is full with a lot of things in the city. There's some things that if you could change about the city, I know it's democracy, so there comes with a lot of bureaucracy in that too as well. If there's something you could change, let's say you waved a magic wand, what would that change be, and how would that lead to the overall vision of Minneapolis?
So I could go with something more macro, but I'll go with my passion. This has been something that I've been passionate about since before I took office, and that's housing. I believe in housing is a foundational element for people to rise. If you have the stability of home, if you have those walls around you and a ceiling over top, if you can close the door on the world, take a breath and rejuvenate for the next day, until that happens, you can't start thinking about getting a job or becoming an entrepreneur or running with a brilliant idea or fighting off an addiction. You need home. And so if I could wave the magic wand and provide one thing, it'd be homes. I mean, homes for everyone that we can get them for.
That's great. And that kind of leads us into our next topic. We're a real estate company, so we're big on homes too. Me, myself, I grew up in Cedar Riverside in Minneapolis my whole life.
Yes.
So apartments, so I know what that is. And when I'm a first generation immigrant, and the biggest thing to me was, home ownership, the quote unquote American dream, having a home, a fence, a dog, that whole spiel. So I know one of your major objectives is affordable housing, given that you did a $40 million investment in 2019, 3 times the previous record in the budget. Someone who, has on both sides of the fence, right, for quote unquote rent control. I've been the renter, I've been the landlord, so I know what both sides are like. And I know St. Paul is doing a 3% increase annually. They have a rent cap for that. Is that something Minneapolis is looking to follow? Is that something that you don't want to? How do we bridge that gap between, investors to continue to invest in Minneapolis, but also at the same time have affordable housing for people?
So I'm a believer in following the data. What the data says is what you ultimately go with. Now, of course, anecdotal stories are always important, but we've got to make decisions that impact people on the macro level. We've got to pass policy on the macro level that then impacts individuals. And here's what we found. The $40 million that you mentioned that we put in had a gigantic impact. We then followed that up with tens of millions, even hundreds of millions of dollars over those next several years, all put into deeply affordable and affordable housing. With that funding, we have increased the rate of production of deeply affordable housing times 5. We are producing 5 times more the amount of low-income housing, deeply affordable housing that we used to. And the way we do that is subsidy. We bridge the gap between whatever constitutes the market rate and the affordable rate. That is proven to work. That is a very good way to bring on more affordability. My general stance on rent control is that I've been against it. Why? Because if you ask the economists who have studied this issue, ranging from the very far left to the very far right, they have just about universally agreed that it doesn't work. Are there instances where the city could step in to prevent kind of rent gouging or this intentional displacement of people by jacking the rents through the roof? Of course, I'm always open to looking at any of these policies. But what you've found in other cities around the world even that have implemented these strict or classic form rent control policies is really one of two things ends up happening. Either one, the landlord says, screw it, I'm not going to do residential anymore, and they remove a unit from production. They remove a unit that would otherwise house someone, or you get people that would have developed housing that choose not to, thus reducing the supply overall and increasing rents on the macro level. So rents actually go up. The other thing that happens is they just say, well, I'm not going to upkeep the place anymore, and it falls into a state of inhabitability.
Yep.
So if you really look at this carefully, of course there are people that benefit. The people who are in the rent-controlled apartment while the apartment is rent-controlled, of course they benefit. The rent is controlled. But then what happens after they leave? What happens when new immigrants and new people want to come into the city to find their place and they can't find one because the supply has been diminished? And so we have to admit where there is a benefit on a temporary basis, but what I'm thinking about is kind of the long term.
Gotcha. And we don't have to go far for rent control, right? Because we're here in St. Paul right now, and they're probably doing, I would say, one of the most strict rent controls at 3% increase. And I think the main problem with that, and most investors say, is due to inflation and other costs. And this is mainly coming from, regular investors. I'm not talking big corporations, the Blackstones or this or that, the ones that gobbling up all the real estate. I'm talking your everyday, mom and pop who bought a duplex or a triplex or a fourplex, and, then the rent is controlled and they're not, like you said, making any money, and then they have at a loss, and then they have to end up selling it to that big corporation, which is you have a different stance than Mayor Carter on this, so we would love to, chat with him on this too, because I agree with you on this rather than the rent control. So it'll be interesting to see what he says as well too.
Yeah, and, keep in mind also, we're mayors of different cities and seeing different dynamics, and so I think Mayor Carter is doing a phenomenal job, and I don't think this is one city versus another. But no, I mean on this perspective, I don't think that rent control is the best way to produce affordability.
Okay. And I've read somewhere that you would veto it if it came up.
Yeah, there was a proposal that was proposed by a work group that we had that would cap the rents at 3%. And yes, I adamantly disagree with that. I think that it would be counterproductive, and pretty much all the data says exactly that.
Okay, perfect. Kind of staying on the real estate theme here, as we are a real estate company. What can we do to bridge the gap between minorities, especially African Americans, and home ownership? You mentioned how key home ownership is to the stability, the wealth, the happiness, everything else stems from there.
That's right.
It's a big disparity in Minnesota, probably one of the biggest in the country, and it's kind of an anomaly because it's like we're kind of a blue state. We do a lot of things here that subsidize and grants. So where can we tackle that? Where it's is it a keep throwing money at the problem issue, or is there something else we can do?
There are more than a few things we can do, but to start highlighting the problem, I think you have about a 75% rate of home ownership for white people and a 25% ownership for people of color. So we're talking, 3 times the amount of ownership in white communities. And we've always known that home ownership has been one of the best mechanisms to pass on generational wealth. You own a home, you die, you pass it on to your kid.
Yep.
It provides a long-term stability, not to mention the equity that you generate in that home can pay for college. The equity that you generate in that home helps to keep you above that threshold of where you're going into poverty. So super important. Now, there are so many reasons why we are where we are. I mean, it's restrictive covenants that run with the land. It's redlining. It's intentional segregation. It's lending practices that have disproportionately impacted communities of color. It's the GI Bill, for Christ's sake. It's the fact that all these white people came home, got the benefit of the GI Bill because they weren't redlined out of a neighborhood. And with those benefits, they were able to, as you stated, live the American dream and get that white picket fence and a mortgage and everything else, and then own that home. Those same benefits were largely prevented in our black community. And so, one, we need to undo and push back on all of those very intentionally racist things that have happened in the past. Moreover, I think we need to be going further towards an anti-racist vision where we're actually making sure that people of color are key beneficiaries in the decisions we're making. For example, if you look at the numbers again, you follow the data, you see so many people can pay that monthly principal. They can pay the monthly amount. What they don't have, and I think you know where I'm going, $40,000, $50,000 just sitting around to put down on a down payment. That's where we can help. So we are through what's called Homes Minneapolis, HOM. We got a program where we are finding ways to get people into that home ownership. People of color live on the north side, live on the south side, have made these neighborhoods wonderful to begin with, and we want to make sure that they reap the benefit, that they get that gain in equity from their presence.
Okay. Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. It's huge because we want to make sure, like you said, that the home ownership, it catapults people into kind of that next level to start thinking about jobs or start thinking about their health or anything else and generational wealth. So I'm glad there is stuff. I know there's a lot of grants and everything like that, but there seems to be a disconnect between giving the grants and actually having it, right? Because I don't know where that disconnect is. Is it just a lack of information? Is it something else that you think? Because I know there's tons of grants, tons of down payment assistance. So there's tons of that stuff, but I'm not sure if it's not, being relayed onto people or what's the issue there?
To your point, sometimes it is a lack of information, and we can improve, I think, on communicating what is available out to people that need it. Additionally, sometimes people say, oh, this is just not an issue you can just throw money at. Well, this is actually an issue that would benefit a lot from money. It is about money. It is about providing that person with $30,000 or $40,000 that they could put down a down payment. And, the city obviously has stepped up in record amounts to do that. St. Paul and Mayor Carter and their council have also stepped up at record amounts. I think it needs to go even further. I mean, so the truth is, Mayor Carter and I, we've done a number of things, including guaranteed basic income, where we are piloting programs. We're advocating for a program that inevitably is best accomplished at a broader scale. We can't do this entirely for more than a few hundred families at the city level. But when you've got thousands and thousands of families that need the assistance through a guaranteed basic income or through a home ownership plan, you really need to get it done at the state or the federal level.
No, I agree. And I think the issue when I first came in 92, it was an issue of credit, right? I understand like down payment, you can have lower amounts and everything like that. But for one reason or another, the worst thing is not having credit rather than bad credit. So it stops a lot of people from home ownership. Is there something that the city could possibly help with that? Or I know, teaching credit is like the hardest thing to people, especially, the young community who get a credit card and they go wild with it. They don't understand how it works. So that's another kind of key, what I wanted to ask you about is because you're right, the money is there. Like you mentioned, Mayor Carter, there's a Rondo grant that he's kind of doing now.
That's right.
That's a huge amount. I think anywhere from 50 to a max of 100,000 for down payment, which is significant. But if you have that down payment and grant, but you don't have the credit, then you're back at square one.
You got to get the credit. You mentioned in part, it's making sure that people have the financial understanding of how it works. The other part is just banking. People, regardless of who you are, should have access to a bank that cares deeply about them and that understands what they're going through.
Yep.
So we've done a lot of work to work with and to help get set up the first black-owned bank, the only black-owned bank in our city, in First Independence Bank. It's a big and important step of bringing that kind of service with cultural sensitivity, with an understanding of what people are going through, and just ability to relate at a way that we haven't seen before.
Gotcha. Okay, perfect. No, that's great. You know, people always don't have the best relationship with banks, so that's good to hear. Switching topics here, the city was really catapulted into national and global news in the aftermath of the tragic killing of George Floyd and the subsequent protests and riots, which took a toll on the city, the residents, and yourself. We're aware that you rightfully chose not to abolish the police, but what measures are being taken to ensure police accountability, rebuild trust between the community and law enforcement, and at the same time promote social justice in Minneapolis?
That's right. I mean, this is an area where change can't happen fast enough.
Mm-hmm.
But change also won't happen simply through the passage of a policy.
Yep.
We have implemented a litany of policies. I mean, and I can go through the countless reforms and changes that we've made. It's more than any time in the history of our city. You know, just to give you a few, when I took office, we had about a 55% compliance with body cameras. In other words, 55% of the time, police officers were turning them on and activating them when they should. Now we're above 95%. So, 55% then, 95% now, we're making progress. We revamped our entire use of force policy. We've changed our field training program. We've revamped the matrix, which is used for disciplinary acts. And yes, we've been disciplining officers at a higher rate than we've ever seen before. All of these things are policy changes that are important. And I could, by the way, go on with 15 more of them that we've made.
Mm-hmm.
But to change the dynamic, you got to change the culture.
Yeah.
Culture is about people. It's about personnel. It's about getting the right officers in, the wrong officers out. We are making strides towards that end. And it's also about just shifting a mentality. And so there's so much work that's happening, not to mention, we are potentially going to be signing on to a settlement agreement and a consent decree with the feds. Mm-hmm. Settlement agreement with MDHR. Which lays out kind of a guideline. It's a framework through which we can shift the culture and make improvements within the department itself. The short answer is we're making the change. Is it going to happen overnight? No, it won't. Are people right to demand urgency? Yes, they are. We need to do that. That's on us. I think we all need to recognize the magnitude of this moment that we're in and understand that Minneapolis has got to make these changes.
Do you think, I know, kind of COVID interrupted this, but there's more, community-based between the police officers and the community coming out to have maybe some fun nights or stuff like that, and plus having an amount of cops who are from that actual community, right? Is there something like that could be implemented? I know it's a big city, it's tough to police over all of it, but is there something where it's, hey, we have X amount of police officers that have to be from said community to patrol there?
So I do need to give some credit to our police officers that are working their tails off.
Yes.
I mean, because we have seen some pretty significant attrition from our police department. The numbers are much lower, and still they're getting record numbers of guns off the streets. They're doing incredible work, and I'm proud of them. Mm-hmm. You mentioned a statistic or a dynamic, which is true, which is, the vast majority of the cops don't live in the city. Now, there are many reasons for that. Mm-hmm. City can be expensive to live in. For starters,
yes.
and so that is one segment of it. The other is, you said, can we require officers or a certain percentage of officers to live in the city? We can't. That would be against state law. There was a very clear law that was passed a number of years ago that don't allow municipalities to require that employees, cops or otherwise, live in the city itself.
Gotcha. Okay. Makes sense. Kind of staying on the topic of safety. I love Minneapolis, but it seems like safety has become a key issue especially recently. I think the main thing, we'll boil it down to the micro level, the carjacking. It's become such a common theme in the city. I recently had a good friend of mine. Her dad had his work vehicle stolen. It was a traumatic experience for her and her father. How do we stop this from happening? It seems to be underage teens and kids who are doing a majority of these crimes from the outside. A lot of people are saying that, there's not a significant punishment or consequences. Would you agree that this stems from something, a lack of consequences or punishment, or is this something more? Is this, when you peel the onion back, it's, poverty or something else, after school programs or community centers? Growing up in Cedar Riverside, I can't tell you how important and imperative the Brian Coyle Community Center,
that's right.
was in my development and growth and kind of keeping me off the streets.
Of course, it's critical. And so to chart back on a few different issues you pointed out. One, safety is perhaps the most important issue that we deal with.
Yep.
People need to feel safe where they live. They need to feel safe on their way to work, on the way to school, anywhere. And we have actually seen a pretty significant decrease in crime and violent crime and carjackings in the last, say, 6 months or so. In those last several months of 2022, we saw in some of them about a 60% decrease in carjackings. Decrease in shots fired, decrease in homicides over the previous year. Now, the previous year was not it was not a very high bar there in that it was one of the worst years that we've had in quite a while. 2021 was not a good year with respect to crime.
Yep.
Period. But we are definitely making progress there. And you asked, what are the things that we can do? There are 100 reasons for increases in crime.
Yep.
There are 100 reasons for a decrease in crime. One, as you correctly mentioned, young people need things to do.
Yeah.
They need to be able to interact with the community, get support from other people. Yes, their parents, but also beyond their parents. It takes a village. You mentioned Brian Coyle. That's a village there.
Yep.
That's an incredible village of people that are looking out for one another, that love each other, that want to be compassionate to each other, and that care. That's what a community center offers, which is why we put in, I believe, a record amount of funding, $3.7 million or $2.7 million additional dollars into funding these rec centers in our last budget, and that's ongoing. So that's happening now. We've got these teen tech centers where they go in, sparked centers where they go in and they can learn how to mix music. They can play video games. They can understand how to code. I mean, all this stuff that we never had when I was growing up, young people are really interested in, and so we're funding it. We're meeting people where they are to fund it so that rather than go down the wrong route, here's the right route. Additionally, yes, you need to hold people accountable that are committing violent crimes. It's just the truth. Mm-hmm. If someone is repeatedly hurting someone or threatening to hurt someone, you mentioned the carjackings, they're perpetrators of violent crime. They need to go to jail. Now, is that the only route? No. Are there opportunities for diversion? Of course. But we need to find that right balance where we are both doing everything we can ahead of time to prevent that crime from happening. And of course, we enforce the law when it does.
Yeah. I think, it's a thing of because they're underage most of the time, a majority of them. It seems to be like, okay, they come in and then they come back out and it's just like you said, a repeat offense. At what point is it, hey, you've done this 2, 3, 4 times. There has to be some type of significant consequence.
To your point, you don't want to just send a 12-year-old or a 15-year-old. You don't want to send anybody to jail. That's never the goal. That's never the goal. But if you are terrorizing a community and you're doing it again and again, we have an obligation to protect the people that live in this city.
Correct. And it's the people, the businesses, you want to feel safe when you're in the city. And I feel like a lot of people have recently not felt safe, like you mentioned in 2021, how everyone, people had season tickets to Twins games, Vikings, etc., all this stuff. And it was on a sharp decline just due to not feeling safe. Restaurants. I know when I met you at the Breakfast with the Mayors, you highlighted North Loop. which is a great community, but around that area, there is a lot of crime, a lot of carjackings, a lot of violent crimes. How do we make more communities similar to the North Loop where people do tend to feel more safe and can go to bars, restaurants, etc.?
Well, North Loop has an interesting dynamic, and it's something that I push for as a council member, having represented that neighborhood.
Third ward. Yep.
And what we said is, let's abandon the traditional way of zoning and thinking about planning. It used to be that you said, all right, all the residential over here and all the commercial over there,
Yep.
all the entertainment here, the restaurants here, the light industrial over there.
Yep.
And what we said with North Loop is all of it together, all of it.
Yep.
I want residential and commercial. I want you to be able to walk outside and have 10 different uses, maybe even on your block.
Yep.
And with that, what you have is a diversity of use and a diversity of people. You got someone who's working the night shift, and so they've got eyes on the street when they're coming home. You've got someone that's out walking their dog, maybe at that same moment. You've got someone else that's coming home from work, someone else that's going out to eat, and someone else who's partying. With that, you've got this constant inflow and outflow of people through the space.
Yep.
You have eyes on the street through both the night and day. And where you have eyes on the street, it's less likely that crime is going to take place. Not to mention, you're more resilient to trends of the economy or even COVID. I mean, I've joked before, it's like nobody in North Loop ever got COVID.
Yeah.
Of course, that's not true. It's a joke. But it is a dynamic there that I think can be replicated in that we can have multiple uses.
Going based off what you said in regards to North Loop and, joking, no one got COVID there. The pandemic had significant impact on businesses and the economy in Minneapolis. What steps have you guys taken to help businesses recover and support that local economy? Because a lot of businesses, a lot of great businesses, in particular uptown, have closed or moved.
They have. And there is a dramatic change in how we do business and how we do commercial. A lot of these changes, I think, were probably inevitable, but they got expedited by 5 to 8 years by COVID-19. And I'll give you one example. This notion of working remotely. It was going to happen.
Yeah.
You have to admit, it was going to happen. But it got expedited and happened a lot sooner than anybody anticipated because we were forced, in many cases, to work from home. Now that that's happening, and I'll give you an example of like downtown, I think we're going to get back to, let's say, 80% occupancy, but that remaining 20%, I'm not so sure. And so what do you do with that remaining 20%? Some of it can be converted to residential. Some of it can be more open space, cooperative style working areas. But we're going to need to be innovative, and I think the biggest way to fail here is to cling white-knuckled to what was before, to what it was back in 2019, because it is going to change no matter what. Now, we at the city have all sorts of packages that we've provided to small businesses, whether that's technical assistance and support or waiving of permitting or license fees, things that we can do to help provide some additional assistance through subsidy or give them a foundation from which they can rise as a business. We also are trying to adapt as quickly as possible to this new state. Businesses, for instance, in the Skyway, downtown.
Yep.
They have been hit really hard because, again, there's less of a customer base than there once was. There's fewer people that are coming into work.
Yeah.
Now, again, I strongly encourage people to come back. Remember all of the things that you love about the city because it's still there, whether that's the crack of the bat over at Target Field or that's the farmer's market on Nicollet.
Yep.
Or some packed, sweaty bar. Like a lot of those packed, sweaty bars, they're still there and they want to see you and they want to serve you drinks. Go to them. Remember them. Quit sitting at home on your couch watching Netflix. Like there are great things to do into the city and go out and frickin' experience it.
Yep.
We live in an awesome city. And so part of us, what Melvin Carter does, what I do, is we highlight the great things that set us apart in the Twin Cities, in Minneapolis, in St. Paul, and we lean into them. And I think it's going to take all of us rallying around the place that we love in Minneapolis to really make sure that things come back even more. And so will the city step up? Will we continue to step up? Of course we will. Of course. And we're going to need to all be working together.
Wonderful. Yeah, no, like you mentioned, I love this city and I want to continue to support local businesses. And we do here at Superior and Weekly Deposit, we do a local business highlight. So we go around and, try to support the small businesses.
That's awesome.
Hopefully, we do continue to work towards that. You're absolutely right in the fact that it was going to change. Change is inevitable. And it just kind of expedited that change. Right. So sticking on the city, Minneapolis is known for its vibrant arts and culture scene. How do you plan to support and promote the arts in the city, especially during these challenging times when a majority of people are still fearful for safety and other concerns that they have regarding the city? How do we still get those great events going? Getting them the sports games and everything like that. How do we support the arts? Because Minneapolis and in turn Minnesota is probably one of the leading front runners in the culture and the arts.
That's right. We are a leading artistic city.
Yep.
Our creative class, I believe, is second to none. By the way, we got, this is several years ago now, but we had the top ranked arts district in the entire country in the Northeast Arts District.
Yep.
When you add to that the fact that we've got more theater seats per capita than almost any city in the entire country, I think New York City has beat us slightly.
Yep.
When you add to that this beautiful and fantastic street art that we've seen, when you've got graph artists that are incredible, when you've got sculptors and performance artists that really set us apart, yeah, it is spectacular. Mm-hmm. I think one of the big things that we've always been encouraging is to make sure that some of these more established venues, be they for theater or painting,
yep.
They're also highlighting and uplifting some of the talent that is not necessarily established yet. And so we do a lot of work through. We're putting on a new city department. Our arts department is going to be elevated in a way that hopefully we can help the arts even more so. Okay,
perfect. Yeah, I'm a big Guthrie guy. I went to the Guthrie a lot,
yes.
And growing up, going there, the theater. And you mentioned Northeast. I mean, it's a night and day difference between growing up what Northeast was and what it is currently. I think you came here 2009,
yep.
If I remember. So way before that, Northeast was crime-ridden. There was a lot of stuff. So it's really, really changed. And I feel like it is due to that community of artists and creative people who have really, really changed it for the better.
That's right. And artists have a long history of doing that. There were a lot of artists that live in North Loop.
Yep.
And they made sure to open studios. Suddenly, more people wanted to be there. They wanted to be immersed in creativity and beautiful art. And next thing you know, the prices start getting jacked up and they get displaced or they can't quite pay for it. They
yep.
move over to Northeast and, this is this cyclical thing that constantly happens. But one of the big pieces is how can we support these artists? How can we help to subsidize their
yep.
rent or their living? Because we need them in the city. We need them. They help to challenge us and make us think outside the box, challenge our perceptions in a way that I think is constantly helpful.
Well, you mentioned it there. It's a double-edged sword because at the same time, you get these creative people in and everything like that, then the rents, quote-unquote, gentrification,
yep.
and other people have to move out because they just can't pay the rent anymore right. because of the increase. So that is a huge problem because at the same time, you want to have that, but at the other time, you're kicking out these low-income families. So it's a duality that you have to
It is a duality. That's exactly
yep.
right.
Okay, final question. What message would you like to convey to the residents of Minneapolis and those considering, like yourself, that want to move to the city? If you want to even talk into your own camera there and let people know about this wonderful city and what you really love about it and what you hope the future.
Well, I won't let my bias show at all in this. Minneapolis is the greatest city in the entire world. There is no place like it.
I agree.
If you want to raise a family, Minneapolis is the spot to do it. If you want the best park system in the entire country, Minneapolis is the place that has it. We've got more parks within a shorter distances per capita than just about any city in the entire country. It is like a city in a park. If you want opportunity to progress, well, Minneapolis has one of, if not the lowest unemployment rates of anywhere in the country. Minnesota, in fact, just recently set a record on that front. Great jobs, great opportunities, and extraordinary people too. You know, the diversity that we have, I believe, sets us apart, and our diversity is diverse. You know, we have one of the largest Somali communities in the entire world outside of Mogadishu. We've got an incredible Southeast Asian and Hmong community as well. And all of this adds to the richness of the culture of who we are and makes it an incredible place to live.
Have you ever gone to the Somali Mall?
Oh, countless times. Mall 24, Carmel, one over Cedar Riverside, you name it. And it's one great example. You know, there's a few places where I always tell people who are visiting to come, check out. I always go with the Stone Arch Bridge. Stone Arch Bridge is a beautiful.
I love walking there.
Frame up the whole downtown as the backdrop and the city as you're right out on the Mississippi River. It's stunningly beautiful. I always tell people, you got to check out the lakes too. The chain of lakes that stretch throughout the city, because it's just something that
Lake Nokomis, you mentioned earlier.
Nokomis is a great one, a beautiful one. The other one thing I love people to check out is Somali malls. Because you walk in there and the color hits you in the face.
It's very colorful.
Right off the get-go. Vibrant. I mean, you don't know what the definition of vibrant is before you've seen a Somali mall.
I like the gold stores personally.
Right? They're stunning.
Have you ate a sambusa?
Of course.
I was going to say, next time we're on here, we'll get some sambusa.
We'll have some sambusa together. Some sambusa, some beast boss, some moss, banana.
I love it.
Yeah, it's the way to do it.
All right, next time we'll do that.
Good.
Mayor Frey is here. Mayor Frey, thank you so much for your time. We hope that you enjoyed it. We hope we weren't too harsh on you.
No.
We know how valuable your time is. We're eternally grateful for you to come here today to speak to us, our viewers, our listeners. We really hope you enjoyed this podcast, and we hope you come back in the future. Who knows? Maybe you'll be a senator, a governor. I don't know what your future plans are, but
mayor's just fine. But thank you so much. You guys did an incredible job. This is the real deal. Weekly deposit.
Thank you. And we named it just to kind of weekly deposit, not because it's anything monetary, because we want to present value. We want to deposit value into people's lives. I was reading this book once where it seems a lot of people withdraw from you energy, money, time, whatever. We don't want to be that. We want to deposit into your life, whether that be, any type of value, any type of news or anything like that. So that's why we named it Weekly Deposit. So it has nothing to do with monetary.
The value is received.
So we pray for you, the city's continued success, and above all, we pray for your health and the health of your family. Thank you once again. Everyone, please like, subscribe, comment what you love about the city of Minneapolis, and what are some changes you'd love to see in the city for the mayor to implement. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks, everyone, and we'll see you back for episode 15.